Welcome to Brain Health Besties, a human-forward podcast for those of us who want to feel better but don't know where to start. I'm Bailey, a licensed professional counselor.
And I'm Nia, a qualified mental health professional.
And I'm Shelby, a human.
We are so glad you're here. And we believe that you deserve to know how your brain works and how to nurture it, even when self-care feels a little challenging.
We focus on kindness to ourselves and recognizing our own needs with as little guilt as possible, because your brain deserves a bestie.
Stars in my eyes, I can't see which way is right, but if there's one thing that I know, it's only up front.
Hey besties, the practices we talk about here are great for your brain, but this podcast isn't treatment. If you're feeling overwhelmed, please call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Help is always available. Hey besties, you are tuning in to a Learning Together episode. Now today's topic we wanted to give y'all a heads up is maybe a little bit heavier, a little bit harder to sometimes approach this conversation. Today we're talking about death by suicide. And this is really important specifically because we're talking about prevention and how connection can be such a vital aspect of prevention when it comes to death by suicide. As we talk through this, what we want to give you permission to do is care for you in whatever ways you need to. If you need to check out of this episode, that is absolutely okay. With the reminder that 988 is a service we can contact, call, chat, or text 24/7 for crisis support from a professional at any time. So as we go through this, if you're finding yourself in that higher rating in crisis and deserving extra care, please do not hesitate to connect to those vital resources. We will also connect in the show notes. We'll give you connections to the NAMI Warm Line as well as those 988 resources. Now, today's topic is also about a conversation around connection as prevention for death by suicide. It is not formal suicide prevention training. We'll also include some of that information in the show notes if you are interested in receiving suicide prevention training. All right, you all. Today's topic is a bit of a bigger topic and an important conversation to have. So before we get into this, I really just want to sink into our practices and what we come back to over and over and take a moment to self-assess. So invitation to take a deep breath. I'm going to take one, too, and let it out. And then how are you all doing in this very moment on that 0 to 5 scale?
Thank you for that invitation, Bailey. I think today I'm at about a 1.75.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I'm at a 3, which is higher than I would normally rate. And I think it's probably excitement and goals that are coming and some nerves and all of it. So yeah, just kind of right there in the middle today.
Part of being human.
Yeah. It really is. I would put myself probably right around a 2. Coming down, I was a little bit higher earlier, but a few practices have helped me be here. Some deep breaths always helps. A little higher than normal, but not anything unmanageable. I can be with this too in this moment.
Love that.
Yeah. And a beautiful example of how it changes moment to moment.
Yeah.
And that's just part of it.
Yeah. So Shelby, I know that when we started talking about having this conversation around death by suicide, you had some, I just want to highlight your voice because you had some really poignant thoughts about how to have this conversation and how to kind of introduce this topic.
Sure.
I'm curious what those are.
Thanks, Bailey. I do want to start out by saying and being very clear that you do not have to be a therapist, a licensed professional, trained, or any variation of to have conversations about suicide, to have conversations about how connection is prevention. So just putting that out there. If you are not a licensed professional, if you are just a human like I am, you are also capable of having these conversations. And it is so important that as a society, we start having these conversations together.
Yeah. And what I will also say to that is I am a trained professional and I am also human. And these conversations at times are still really challenging to have, especially when it's people that I care deeply about, when it's our folks, when I'm in the community. This is a hard conversation because this is not a normalized topic in our society. So I just want to say, yes, if we are not trained professionals, and also for us who have been deeply trained in these things, these are hard topics to bring up because they're not fully socially acceptable. So I just wanted to kind of lay that on, and thank you too, Shelby, for kind of setting that foundation and reminding us that this can be a challenging topic no matter who we are and no matter how much training we have.
And so today we're going to talk through it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think we talk about that a lot, is the idea that just getting that conversation started is really helpful. It gives us the practice that we need. I guess sometimes when we start a conversation, when we have a little bit of something to think about before it happens, it's almost like having that tool in our pocket that we can reach for when we need to. So that's what we hope we're going to do today, and just have a conversation about it.
Yeah. So here is, and we were sort of talking through some of the challenges of these conversations, the reasons that maybe we as a society and a community pause on asking somebody. One of those is a familiar myth that we hear about in the behavioral health world, which is if I mention suicide, it's putting that idea in somebody's mind. But the reality, that's just not true. There's lots of research to back up that if we mention suicide to somebody, it is not planting the idea of suicide in their mind. It would kind of be like saying, if I say the word heart attack, that might cause somebody to have a heart attack. If that is happening, it's happening regardless of whether or not we say the word out loud. So what happens when we start talking more openly about things like death by suicide? It allows some normalization of the conversation. It allows us to label what's happening so that we can best be there for our people and ourselves in ways that are meaningful and caring.
Yeah.
I think
Labeling it is that first step to knowing what to do next. If I don't know you're having a heart attack, I don't know what to do for you next. The same with thoughts of suicide or suicidal ideation. If I don't know it's happening, if you don't know it's happening, we don't know what the next step is.
Yeah. And I think something that is really nuanced, that when I was doing therapy specifically with adolescents and teenagers, is the suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts is really, really broad. I think I'm going to say some things that might feel sort of alarmist to people, that might sound really hard to hear. And so I just want to say them. When we are having thoughts like, I don't want to be alive, I want to take my life, I don't want to be here anymore, those are suicidal thoughts, yes. However, the suicidal thoughts happen on a spectrum, because also the desire to go to sleep and not wake up the next day is a suicidal thought. And there's a whole wide range of that. So once we start to normalize that suicidal thoughts are not just, how can I take my own life? We recognize that it's also things like, it would just be easier if I weren't here. It opens up some normalization of that conversation, because how I show up for myself or somebody else who is saying, I don't want to wake up tomorrow, is different than how I show up for somebody who is saying, I have a plan to hurt myself. And so when we start having those conversations and asking those questions, it starts to normalize that a bit. I can't tell you how many kiddos I met with that when I said most people have some form of suicidal thought at some point in their life. A lot of people do. It's more normal than you realize, because many of us have had a moment where we have thought like, oof, I just don't want to be here right now. And so I think, first of all, just kind of laying that out there, that it is a spectrum, that this happens in a lot of different ways. And when we labeled it appropriately in the varying degrees, and again, allows us to know how to best show up for ourselves and the people we care deeply about.
Well, those are the pieces of the communication too. So all those different ways of expressing the pain or the worry or the grief or the whatever is inside, all those ways of saying kind of the same thing. Mm-hmm. And that's just, again, starting that conversation. So I think that's part of what we want to talk about, is how do we pick up on those things, or why we were talking earlier about why it's kind of hard to even start the conversation. Sometimes we talked about early when we were preparing for before our time today, we were talking about sometimes we may have even heard somebody kind of come at it from a joking side, right? But at this table, and we're sharing today, we know that sometimes that's to kind of try to take that hard subject again that we're talking about and just kind of throw it out there. Maybe it's a way to kind of see how that person might take it. So let's talk about that. So what are some next steps if Bailey, you talked about kind of the things that sometimes we might hear people say, not maybe as severe as I am going to take my life, but I just don't want to wake up. So what is the next step after we might hear something like that?
Well, and I was actually going to ask you the same question, but I'll hold. Yeah. I was going to ask you about the joking part. So if somebody tells me that they're having a moment where they just don't want to wake up the next day, it goes kind of against how we would naturally react. And this is something that I have worked really hard on. And still, if it were my people, I don't know how well I would do this, or how well I do this in this moment. I try not to react in an alarming way, because the thing that I don't want to have happen is I don't want them to feel scared or unsafe having the conversation with me. I want to keep that conversation
something
going.
Wrong,
yes,
and then now we can't say anything else about it.
So I ask a lot of follow-up questions, and like, oh man, that sounds really hard. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on or what's got you feeling that way? Might be the first reactions.
Yeah, part of having these conversations and normalizing talk around suicide and suicide prevention is so that we are a little bit more comfortable when those conversations happen, so that we don't automatically have to react in a alarmist way and scare somebody into sharing what they're feeling.
I think maybe it gives us too the little bit of a plan. Like if we think to ourselves, what if we do have somebody in our lives that does come to us with these big feelings that they're having? What am I going to say?
Yeah.
So it goes back to that practice and being able to just start the conversations.
Yeah. And I'm going to reflect that question back to you, because you mentioned like those folks. And again, I'm going to say this, and this may feel like a lot for people, but saying the friend or the person who says, well, I'll just go kill myself then. And there is a tone where you're like, you're saying that like a joke. Is it a joke? How do you respond to that?
And I think that's an interesting question because it can come across in lots of different ways. I've known of people who were only 16 years old and in relationships, maybe romantic relationships, and one partner says that because of the emotions that are there. Maybe it's a situation that they've had an argument or whatever it is. Or you have the person who, again, we're saying it as a joke, that it just comes out when you wouldn't expect it. But I think the thing that we're hoping people hear today is to take it seriously if we can. Right? It takes some vulnerability and some braveness to be able to say our real feelings, whatever they are. And if it's something like that, like you just expressed, I think we need to take that breath. And you're talking about kind of trying to sit with ourselves and have a reaction that doesn't close them down, because we are helpers. If it's a person we love, our acquaintance, whoever it is, I think that we want to be able to help them. But I think also too, sometimes we might wonder if we say the wrong thing, if we don't say it quick enough, what will happen? And I think I want people to know that we just want to try to have a little bit more of the conversation. So asking more questions, empathizing, maybe even saying, gosh, thank you for telling me that. That really sounds like a big feeling, a big situation. Can you tell me more what's going on? And it's oftentimes that can really start to add some ease, just allowing someone to share their story. And we talk about just even being able to sit with somebody in their feeling that they're in. Right, being physically present for somebody can be something that is huge as well. That also takes practice, right? To be able to sit with somebody just in that silence, just in that feeling with them, to just be that presence also takes some practice too.
Which is why we're talking about that connection piece today. And my question to you all is, that's something that we hear a lot, is you're not alone. It's kind of a buzzword right now, but can connection actually make a difference?
So the answer is yes. And it's complicated, which if you know anybody in the behavioral health world, you'll frequently hear that. Yes, or it's complicated or it's gray. What we know and we've said this from the beginning, is human beings are wired for connection, that there is research that shows, and I'm going to say it carefully with some follow-up. There is research that shows one healthy relationship and connection with an individual can prevent them from dying by suicide. And I say that carefully because it is not the job of one human being to be the lifesaver for somebody else. It truly, we have this phrase that we use, that it takes all of us, because it truly does. Because although that is true, that one person can mean the difference between life or death for somebody,
100%.
we know that the more supports in different environments that people have, the least likely they are to die by suicide. And so while yes, it can be the one person, it is not a single person's job to be it all. And that as an individual is really, really hard.
Yeah. I thank you for saying that and kind of validating that feeling. Personally, I have had people very, very close to me that have struggled with suicidal ideation. And there is a little bit of that pride that I have to get over and kind of just get over myself with not being the one person that can fix it, right? I am a caregiver. I am a fixer. Like I just want to fix the problem. And I know that I am not the only one that has to carry that burden, but that is, again, getting over myself a little bit and sharing it, because I know there are amazing community resources. So I don't have to carry it alone. And I think reframing it as that instead of I have to fix it. I have to be the one to do it. If I don't do it, I fail.
Yeah.
And it's sharing it a little bit with, wow, we have these amazing resources. I don't have to be the expert. If I call 911 because somebody's having a heart attack, I don't become a heart surgeon and have to fix it.
Yeah.
I lean into those resources that we know we have, and they send the professionals.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, thank you for saying the 911 part too, because, and I was thinking this when Nia was talking about like asking further questions. I think sometimes maybe the things that hold us back from asking further questions is, what do I do if there's a response that I don't know how to handle? And much like you're saying, I don't become a heart surgeon when somebody's having a heart attack. I call in the professionals. We can call in the professionals. We can co-call or co-text 988 with somebody. And we say that, hey, I want to be in it with you. I want to support you. And this is beyond what I think I am capable of supporting you on. I don't know what to do next. So is it okay if we call 988 together? Is it okay if we chat 988 together? So that you're still in it with them. You're not abandoning this person. You're not being that person, but you're in it with them and letting the professionals do what the professionals do. And so we don't have to know it all.
It's kind of like the conversation piece, by being that first person that is there with them, that notices, that knows them enough, that they told whatever it is, you are the person that gets the kind of the whole thing started. It could be like, well, with the heart surgeon kind of reference, sometimes people are able to recover quickly from a heart issue. Maybe they do have a surgery, maybe they don't, but they're able to recover. Same thing with people who need mental health support. Sometimes it would take just a person to be able to sit down with them, to be able to get through whatever that situation is. But what we're doing in the community that we live in, we're seeing other people when they might need some struggle. And by being able to remember those resources and to learn about the resources, we've added to the conversation, to the story. It might be that somebody is struggling and has been for a long time, or is struggling newly. By being able to be with you, whoever you are, that's able to help and support somebody, maybe you do call 988 together. 988 is beautiful because someone's always going to answer. And one of the things they can do is kind of help walk through a plan for that person. And then maybe there's a next step and a next step and a next step and a next step, and that's okay. Because sometimes too, we as that single person may not feel like we have the full capacity. Maybe we ourselves are a little bit struggling ourselves. Maybe we just don't have the words to say. Maybe, I don't know, there's a lot of maybes that go into that. But being able to have those resources to lean into, I think, is really important, and to remember them.
Yeah. Yeah. Bailey earlier when we were running through this episode had a really brilliant kind of metaphor for parenting in specifically, but it applies to everything, I think. It's that suicide prevention is not a marathon. Parenting is not a marathon. Is a marathon, excuse me. It's not a sprint. Being a human is a marathon, right? And when you think about marathon runners, they don't do it alone.
No.
There are coaches, there are trainers, there are people on the sidelines handing them cups of water and nutrition. There are crowds cheering. Like, that marathon runner does not do it alone. And it's the same with suicide prevention. It's the same with being a human. It's the same with being a parent. Letting those other people help you is what makes life.
Yeah, I like the marathon analogy too, because it takes practice to be a marathon runner. It takes practice with, again, nutrition before the race. Maybe you've researched and studied. Maybe you even have a certain shoe you like to wear, or the clothing, right? So it takes a long time to be able to fall comfortably into that kind of marathon. And that's the same thing as what we're talking about, being human here and all the things that we go through.
Yeah. And this is really kind of going in two different directions for me too. So I want first to stay with the people we are in close relationship with. And then I also eventually want to get to, like, what do we do if we're just in the community and it's not somebody we know? So when we speak about marathons and these folks that it's us or the people that we love dearly, connection and prevention happens in a lot of different stages. We have been talking a lot about intervention when somebody we care deeply about says, I'm having these thoughts, or I have this struggle going on. That's intervention. That is interacting in a moment where somebody is saying, I am thinking about suicide. There are a lot of things that we can do as prevention leading up to those spaces where maybe somebody does get to that point. There is a game that we play in my house called High-Low Buffalo, and it is laying the foundations for open conversation. Every day at dinner, we say, what was your high of the day? What was the low of the day? And Buffalo is anything that is worth mentioning, but not the high or low from the day. And what that does is begins laying the foundations for allowing our kiddos and the grown-ups at the table do it too, for checking in with each other and normalizing that process of checking in and how we're doing and how our day has been, so that when we are in a tough moment, I can look at my kids and saying, Mom's having a hard time. Or one of my girls can say, Mom, it's been a hard day. So it's laying that foundation. We can do the same with our friends by sending texts that just say, hey, how are you doing? I know you've had a rough couple weeks. Like, I just want to check in on you. Those are laying the foundations for normalized conversations about humanity and being human, and not just the bright, shiny parts, but also the challenging parts too. So that if somebody does get to the point or is in a space where they're having thoughts of suicide, we have already laid the foundation and the groundwork for being opening that conversation and dialogue.
Yeah. And thank you for saying you were going in two directions, because I sort of was too. Some people may feel that they don't know how to intervene if it is somebody they don't know.
Yeah.
Say we're in a grocery store, we're at a ball game, and somebody appears to be having a mental health crisis. What is our obligation? What do we do?
That's a great question. And I think the way that for me personally, knowing that this is going to be different for everybody and that their level of comfort is going to be different, I would approach it in the same way as dialing 911. If I think or see somebody who might be in physical health crisis or emergency, I dial 911 to let some experts make that judgment call and say whether or not, like, yes, they were in crisis or emergency or not. The approach that I take for mental health crisis is the same. I dial 988. It's not my job in the community to try to figure out if that person is in mental health crisis, and I lean into the experts, because that's why they're there. And that recognize that is not going to be everybody's comfort zone, and trying to kind of figure out what is comfortable for you, what feels like the right level of intervention. Maybe we're in moments where like, ooh, yeah, suicide prevention training would be really helpful, which would walk more in detail around those things. But for me, the default would be if it appears that somebody is in a mental health crisis, I would dial 988 just like I would 911.
Wonderful. And I will say, I have first responders in my family. I'm very close to several first responders and crisis workers. They never see it as a burden. Mm-hmm. They would rather you call and it not actually be an emergency, or they are not actually needed, than to not be called and it was an emergency or they were needed. So you're never a burden for reaching out. You are never wasting resources or clogging the system. You are doing your part to help somebody, to help yourself, to help the community.
Yeah. And that's that it takes all of us piece. Like imagine, and this is where my sort of behavioral health brain gets all kind of wide scope, right? Imagine if we trained our kiddos and our community members to dial 988 in the same way that we dial 911. I mean, think about how little we were when our parents started telling us, if there's an emergency, if one of your parents gets hurt, if you're at school and something happens, if you see a car accident, dial 911 before anything else. Like that is the only direction, dial 911. What would happen if we trained our communities to do the same with mental health crisis? Think about how many lives are saved every single year with 911 resource. Think about how many lives we could save if 988 were the same go-to.
And the beautiful thing is we're only in year 3 of 988. Right. Yeah. So we get to help build that response. We get to help build the training for people and the awareness of 988 so that maybe someday that's what happens. People dial 988 the same way they would dial 911. Friends, it's been a little bit of a heavy topic today, so I do want to end on some hope and a question that our besties might kind of have burning in the back of their mind. Life can feel really hard.
Yeah.
It is. There's a lot going on. How do you find a little bit of hope when things feel really dark?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. Thank you. I'm glad we get to end on this one. I think if I'm going to go for it personally, I think mine would be, for me, I really thrive in routine. So if I probably, was, if I'm struggling, I'm hopefully going to notice that I've let something go. The workout in the morning or certain things that I do throughout my day. And I think for me, to find the hope again is knowing that because I have before, I can get back into it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just giving myself the challenge to start that again, right? Set the alarm, go ahead and get up and go. And for me, again, reminding myself that I've done it before and that other people have done it before, that I have choices that I can make if I can remember them. And if I can sit with myself, be honest with myself, I can make a new choice. I get to restart. I get to do it again. I get to, look into myself and just go again. So I think that's for me. What about you, Bailey?
Yeah. I would say my first line for finding or tapping into hope is looking internally for those things that bring me hope, the things I know. And there are times where that doesn't work. There are times where even when I'm pausing to reflect internally and think about what are those things, that it is really hard to find it. Yeah. And in those moments, I lean into my people to borrow some hope. And I feel like that's at least seems to me to be like a pretty human thing. And is the reason why connection is prevention is because sometimes it's really hard to find that hope, that spark within us. And so borrowing it or leaning into our people to say like, I need you right now, or give me some reasons, I think it can be really vital and really helpful.
Yeah. Thank you both. Mine's pretty granular. It's my dog greeting me at the door. It's the feeling of sunshine. It's the beautiful sunrise on the way to work, even though I don't want to go. It's my friends at work being so excited because there's ice cream in the freezer. It's just those little things that really keep me going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think having those things in our back pocket is just as important as some of the other suicide prevention pieces. Like, where do we go to find hope when it feels hopeless?
Yeah. Speaking of things in our back pocket, besties, thank you so much for joining us for this vital conversation. And if you will join us at our next episode, episode 18, we will walk through a Be Well plan, a crisis intervention plan, so that when we are struggling, we have something already in our back pocket ready to go. Take care, besties.
If you enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe to Brain Health Besties so you can find us in the future.
And since sharing is kind, share us with your besties.
If you have mental health or wellness topics you'd like us to chat about, please reach out to bewell@livebrightly.org.
Until next time, be well, besties.
Shining brighter than